Welcome to a Vegan Society of Hawaii presentation by Dr. Ruth Heidrich, life lessons from an 87-year-old vegan triathlete. 4 decades ago, Dr. Ruth Heidrich was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. She amazingly not only managed to reverse a pretty grim prognosis, but went on to complete 6 Ironman triathlons after that. At 87 years young, she's also won over 900 trophies, including 8 gold medals in the Senior Olympics, and written books on her own story, healthful living, and running. She still trains hard every day. I am privileged to know Ruth through our mutual efforts with the Vegan Society of Hawaii, which is a nonprofit educational organization, of which she is a past president and current director. I continue to be inspired by her gutsy, intelligent approach to the enormous challenges that life has flung at her. And I think you will too. And now here's Ruth.
Thank you, Lorraine, for that invitation and the opportunity to try to spread some good information, some good lessons I've learned. I'm going to start with a question. Did you know that plants can provide you with all the power and resilience you need to accomplish some pretty major, prodigious athletic feats? I'm going to tell you about some of them. How about doing an Ironman triathlon? And just in case you don't know what that is, it's a 2.4 mile swim, and then you jump on your bike and bike 112 miles as fast as you can, and then you run a 26.2 mile marathon. And if doing one Ironman is not enough, how about doing 4 of them in less than a year, when the common knowledge among triathletes is that it takes a full year to recover to do another one. And the difference is, you can guess, maybe plants. How about running up to the top of Haleakala on Maui? There's a race called Run to the Sun. It starts at sea level at Kahului, and you run straight up, it seems like almost straight up, 10 to 10,000 feet, 10,200 actually, and it's 37.2 miles. And I did that and got a gold medal. And that takes a lot of power and strength, believe me. The day after any of these events, I'm raring to go and start doing, I'm feeling totally recovered, whether it's another swim or a run or a bike, or in the case where I was doing Ironmans in Japan and New Zealand, ready to play tourist. So all this due to the power of plants. So how did this all begin? Well, let's go back as far as 1968. I was then 33 years old and just starting to see a few little wrinkles here and there, and thought, oh well, you know, that's gonna happen. And was actually on the mainland and getting ready for a long flight back home to Honolulu. I looked in the newsstand, I wanted to get something to read, and I saw this strange word called aerobics. I had never seen that word before, and I was curious. I wondered what it meant. And no wonder I didn't know what it was, because Dr. Kenneth Cooper had just coined that word. He had been doing research during the Vietnam War. His job as a major in the Air Force was to get a whole bunch of 18, 19-year-old men, adolescent boys actually, into fighting shape in the fastest way possible. And he discovered that any activity that uses your major muscle groups with oxygen made you more fit. And he did all this research and published it in this book called Aerobics. I read the whole thing on the plane back and was so inspired that the next morning I dug in the back of my closet and found a pair of old Bermuda shorts and my old tennis shoes and a t-shirt, And early that morning, went out for my first run. I ran all the way down to the end of my street, turned around, came back, and I thought, wow, this is kind of fun. Got in the car and measured the distance on the odometer, and it was a whole mile. And I thought, wow, I'm going to do this every day. So I started daily running and kept it up until 1970. Well, I had a job at Hickam. I was a logistics officer at the time. And somebody handed me a flyer and said, you know, they've got a race coming up. You ought to enter it. I had never thought of entering a race. I thought, oh, yeah, I can see how fast I'm going, and that might be fun too. So signed up, showed up Sunday morning, and I'm standing there and looking around, and I see nothing but young, fit airmen. And I thought, oh my God, what if I can't finish? What if I come in last? I was ready to slink away and just forget the whole thing. The gun goes off. I have no choice. It's run or get trampled on. I started out way too fast, was out of breath, slowed almost to a walk, and then kind of recovered a little bit and started running again, and my legs turned to lead, and I thought, oh, this is not fun at all. And I just kept on going because I didn't dare quit. Saw the finish line, crossed it, and I thought, oh, I made it. I looked around, and I wasn't even last. I thought, wow. And a few minutes later, I heard my name called. And I went up to the stand, and they handed me a gold trophy. My first race, my first trophy, and I thought, wow, you know, if I trained, went further every morning and faster, I could even get better. Well, that went along to the point where I was even doing more. I did some 10Ks and then a half marathon, and I hadn't even thought about a marathon. 26 miles, that is just way too long. Well, in the office where I was, as I said, a logistics officer, I had 4 young captains working for me, and one of them smoked. They all drank. They were not fit and healthy, but they did some running because they had to maintain the Air Force fitness standards. So they had talked about they were going to do this marathon coming up. And I thought, you know, if they can run with as little training as they have and the unhealthy lifestyle that most of them had, I'm going to do it. So sure enough, it was like that very first race. I started out too fast. I had to slow down and then gradually regain and just keep going, crossing the finish line. I wasn't first. I wasn't the only female. I just did a marathon, and I knew how fit that made me, and I was really happy had no trouble with maintaining my weight. I could eat as much as I want. Of course, back then it was chicken and fish and very little red meat, low-fat dairy. But, you know, I thought that was the perfect diet. In fact, I'd had a nutrition course in college, and that was the diet that they recommended. Said that was the best diet to give you all the protein and all the calcium that you need. After 3 marathons, I was getting ready to do another one, and it happened to be a 4th of July weekend. I was at the beach in Kailua, and I was leaning over, and I was in my bikini top, and my aunt says, "Ruth, look at what's that? That's a lump." And I looked down, and I thought, that wasn't there before. Where did that come from? I got right in to see a doctor, and they took me up to the exam room and took a look at it and said, "Oh, why did you wait so long to come in?" I said, "Wait so long? I had a mammogram 6 months ago and it was negative. I had mammograms before that. I did have another lump and it was benign." And so the biopsy before that, so I'd had two biopsies, and then when the first time I went back, they said, oh, that's just scar tissue, so I wasn't worried about it. But he said, we're going to do an excisional biopsy. That means we cut out the whole thing, not a needle biopsy, not just a little piece of the tissue, but the whole thing. And I thought, well, that's going to be interesting. My curiosity, like being curious about the name aerobics, I was curious to see what that would look like. So I asked the surgeon, can I watch it? And he said, no, you don't want to watch this. Yes, I do. I said, I want to see what's in there, what's that lump is made from. And he said, are you sure you can take it? And I said, yeah, you're going to give me a local anesthetic. I won't have any pain. And he said, oh, okay. So I'm in the operating room, and the nurse is prepping me, and they put up this screen. And I said, no, I'm going to watch it. She said, what? You're going to watch your surgery? I said, yes. Does your doctor know this? I said, yep, he does. So anyway, he anesthetizes me with lidocaine all around and starts cutting. Of course, I didn't feel anything, and I was watching to see, and he cut and cut and cut and cut. Finally got the whole thing out, and it was the size of a golf ball. And I was really surprised at how big it was and the big hole it left. And I thought, well, I want to make sure he stitches it up and so it looks as normal as possible. So he did some stitching, and then I got up and went back into the dressing room, got dressed, and he had said, when you're dressed, come in, and I'll have the report from pathology by then. So after getting dressed, I walked in his office, and he was sitting in a chair with his feet propped on the desk facing the window outside. And I heard the words, infiltrating ductal carcinoma. And those words, oh, they just stung. They shocked, stunned me. I thought, there's some mistake. That can't have been cancer. And he said, well, pathology is pretty sure that it is cancer. And further, there were no clear margins. So I didn't get it all. You're going to have more surgery. And so I'm still in shock and thinking, what's going on here? Perfect diet, perfect exercise. How can I have breast cancer? I went home and thought, I don't know of anybody else. This is back in '82. Back then, breast cancer was about 1 in 13 women. Today, it's 1 in 7 or 8. So back then, it was fairly rare. And in fact, they told me it was rare for someone as young as I was. I was 47 at the time. So I hadn't gone back to work yet. I was still on leave recovering from the surgery. And I had time to read newspapers, and I saw this tiny little ad, about 4 lines, and it said, wanted breast cancer patients to participate in diet research study. Call this telephone number, John McDougall. And so it was a Kailua number, so I knew it was close. Picked up the phone, and I get right through to him. Now, how often when you call a doctor's office, or do you end up talking to the doctor? So I was kind of sputtering and saying, I've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And he said, get your medical records. I need to talk to you. So I got in the next day with my records in hand, and he takes a look at all the blood tests and everything. And he said, with a cholesterol of 236, you are at as high a risk of dying of a heart attack as you are the breast cancer. And I said, how can that be? I run marathons. I eat a good diet. And he said, well, that's what happens. And so he said, the research that I'm doing, I want to prove that a low-fat vegan diet no animal foods whatsoever, no oils, can prevent and reverse cancer. I said, oh, well, I already know I have a good diet, so I'll help you prove that diet doesn't have anything to do with breast cancer. He said, oh, I think it does. He reached around and pulled his file drawer open and said, here's all the research that shows that my hypothesis is right. There were animal studies that showed you put animals on a high-fat diet and they get breast cancer. And the epidemiological studies showed that countries around the world, I have a graph in one of my books, that the higher the fat, the higher the animal content, the higher the rates of not only breast cancer, but heart attacks, other kinds of cancer, prostate cancer in men, and osteoporosis, and all these diseases that people have no idea. In fact, I remember when I said, how could I get cancer? And the answer was, we don't know. Well, Dr. McDougall thinks he knows. So he said, there's one catch. You cannot have any chemotherapy or radiation. And I thought, with stage 4 breast cancer, to not have the chemo and therapy the oncologists say I really should have? And he said, no, if you survive, they'll say it's due to the chemo and radiation and not the diet. So you cannot have chemo and radiation. So I thought, well, I'd asked the doctors why I got this, and they had no evidence. And here Dr. McDougall shows me the research. And I thought, well, if it doesn't work, then I can always later have chemo and radiation. So right there, I said, okay, I'm going to do it. But where am I going to get my calcium? You know, the old questions that the people who don't know ask. And he said, from leafy greens. Where am I going to get my protein? From plants, the same place that hippopotamuses, elephants, rhinoceros, bonobos, primates, they have plenty of protein. So I thought, well, okay. I walked out of his office 2 hours later, a vegan, a low-fat vegan. Of course, at that time, I went home to my then husband, and he said, you what? You're going to go on this crazy cult diet? And I said, no, it's going to reverse my cancer. It's going to save my life. And he said, oh, that is BS. And he used the actual words, no abbreviation. And he said, I gave you credit for more intelligence than that. And whoa, now he's insulting my intelligence. And I said, you know, this diet can help your high blood pressure. It can help, he had other problems too. And he said, oh no, my God, that's ridiculous. Well, you do it. Oh, he did say, how can this same diet for breast cancer help with all these other diseases? And I couldn't answer the question then, but I know now because I switched majors. I was working on my PhD at the time, and I switched to nutrition, and I found out that, yeah, it really makes a difference. So then I went back to home and threw out all the, he said, no, don't throw away with the butter. That's expensive. Because I thought, you know, we ought to get margarine instead. No, I want the butter. And the chicken and fish, don't throw that out. So we ended up with a refrigerator. My side was all the fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and his side was all the lobster and the butter, as I said, and all these other foods. And so I went on the diet by myself. I kept on running. In fact, right after the surgery, I was back in the room. This was the mastectomy. After the biopsy and no clear margins, they said, we need to do more surgery and we need to do a mastectomy. So a few weeks later, I was back in the hospital, and the nurse was helping me unpack my bag. And I had running shorts, running singlet, 2 pairs of running shoes, and a headband. And she said, "What? What's all this?" And I said, "I want to get back to running as soon as possible." And so, oh my gosh. And she walked out of my room shaking her head. And the doctor came in the next day, and he checked the incision. And of course, there was no breast. It was perfectly flat. And some pain, not as much as I would have expected, but of course they were giving me pain meds. And I asked the doctor, "How soon can I get back to running?" He said, "As soon as you feel ready to." And I said, "Well, how long is that going to be?" And he said, "Oh, I figure a couple of weeks." I said, "A couple of weeks? I'm going to lose so much fitness." He said, "Well, if you're ready sooner than that, there's no problem with running." So the next morning, I'm thinking, I wonder if I can, no, I was still hooked up to an IV, and you've seen these hospital IV stands. So I got in the hall, and I started walking up and down the hall, thinking, well, this is better than nothing. And the next morning, I woke up and said, this is the day. So I got into my running clothes and running shoes and exited the hospital door and started a gingerly run. And I thought, oh, I'm back to running again. That's great. And what I found is that with my new diet, that I felt stronger, I recovered faster, and I just felt healthier. I felt like I was going to beat the cancer. My symptoms, the bone pain that kept me up at 2 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep, and the narcotics they gave me didn't stop the pain, that was disappearing. The liver enzymes normalized. There was a tumor in my lung, which they said, we're not sure what it is. Have you ever had pleurisy or any lung disease? I said, no, never. He said, well, we'll have to, we'll follow and see what, if it grows, then we'll have, he said, I don't want to do lung surgery on you unless we know that it's cancer. So I just kept up with the routine of running and recovering. It was my new diet. And the second time, I hadn't gone back to work yet, second surgery, and this time I'm watching television and I'm just checking different channels, and I came upon the ABC Wide World of Sports. And here is the Ironman triathlon. I'd never heard of such a thing. Even as a runner, never heard of a triathlon. And I found out it was this distance that I mentioned, 2.5-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and run a marathon. I thought, well, I've got the running handled. I grew up in Lanikai. I learned how to swim when I was 3 years old. So I can swim, and I've got a rusty bike in the garage. I hadn't ridden for a while. I dig that out and lubricate it and start training. And sure enough, I enjoyed the training. I ran faster, I added swimming and biking, and trained. And you have to qualify for the Kona Ironman, by the way. You can't just show up. You can't just pay your entry fee, which was then $100. You have to qualify for it. And the way you qualify is to get a first, second, or third in a half Ironman. Well, the next year after this is 1983, they have the Windward Half Marathon. So I did that, got a first place in that, which qualified me for Kona. So it didn't go as well as I thought. I'd planned on doing some training on the Big Island, because at that time it was in Kona. It originally was in Honolulu, but moved to Kona. And I got there, and I was about 7 weeks before, and I wanted to do the 112-mile bike course because that was the biggest challenge. And about 3/4 of the way through, something happened. I have no idea what. I woke up in the hospital at 10 o'clock that night saying, where am I? Where's my bike? What happened? And the nurse said, you've been asking that question over and over again. I said, what happened? And she said, well, you had a concussion. I had a concussion? She said, yeah, you were out riding past the airport, and a pickup truck came by and clipped you and knocked you over, and here's your helmet in 2 halves. And if you hadn't had this on, you would have been killed. On top of that, I had such pain in my right hip. And they did x-rays and said, oh boy, you've got a broken hip. It's actually the acetabulum, which is where the head of the femur fits into the hip. You're lucky in that there's no displacement. You're unlucky in that you can't do any training until that heals, so plan on 6 to 8 weeks. Said, wait a minute, I've got the Ironman in 7 weeks. He said, forget, this is Dr. Farron, never forget him. He said, there's no way that you're going to be able to do this year's Ironman. Just accept that, heal, and keep on training and do it next year. I said, well, I'm thinking, I'm going to do it. I know this diet is going to help, and I'm going to heal fast. And I said, just get me in the water. So I flew back to Honolulu, and we had a swimming pool in the back. And I had a stationary bike. Gradually, I got in the water and I started water running every day. And at first, no weight on that hip, and then gradually got better and ran, touching the bottom and then the shallow end, and tried it on land. And I felt a difference. It wasn't that easy. It wasn't that fast a recovery, but I had hopes then. And on the stationary bike, it was a couple of weeks before I could climb onto the stationary bike. And so I worked up to that, and swimming, of course, was no problem. So I kept up with my training, and I thought, I don't care if I don't finish. I'm just going to be at the start. And if you've ever seen the Kona Ironman, it's right at it's just a beautiful setting. So here I am with my Ironman cap and my goggles, looking around, same feeling as my first race. What am I doing here? I haven't run a decent distance ever since the hip injury and the concussion. And I thought, well, you know, if I don't finish, they'll say I told you so, but what if I do finish? So I started out. The swim was no problem. Got out of the water. It's an 2-hour limit, something like that. And my swim time was good. The bike was the hip was hurting, but not too bad. I barely finished that last mile, and I was so glad to get off the bike and get it. And then I thought, uh-oh, well, here's the real test. 26.2 miles. So I ran, walked, and finally came up a Lee Drive and saw the finish line. And here's the picture of me crossing the finish line. Wow! And Dr. Farron was shaking his head. I don't believe this. That's incredible. I said, Dr. Farron, it's my vegan diet. You're what? Vegan, you know, no animal products. He said, oh, okay, and walked away. And so that was my first Ironman. And I was fast enough because I said, you have to qualify. My time was 14 hours, 49 minutes. That qualified me to come back the next year. And so I did that and did the next one. And because of the cancer, I did get some information out to people. It's my vegan diet that made the difference. And they you know, back then, 82, 84, most people had no idea what it was. And I did get an interview from a reporter at Midweek. And she came to my house and she took a bunch of pictures, and I told her my story. And the next week, I'm on the cover of Midweek, which most of you will know. And here's a copy, a picture of it, the front page of Midweek. Well, Continental Airlines took notice, and I get a call from Dennis. He said, we'd like to sponsor you to do Ironman triathlons. I said, really? Sponsor me? He said, yeah. You have to wear Continental on your tri-suit, and we'll fly you there, no cost, and put you up, no cost. And I said, oh. He said, the next one is the New Zealand Ironman. That's in March. And my first thought was, oh, that's too soon. And then I thought, oh, 6 months, I'll have total recovery by then. I don't care what they say about not enough recovery time, because I'm sure I will. So there I am at Honolulu Airport, getting ready to board the plane to Auckland, New Zealand. I get there, and my bike through the baggage claim got damaged, and I thought, oh boy. So I went to the bike shop and they fixed it up, and so I had a couple of days to check out. And Auckland is a bunch of hills, and there's sheep all over the place, and the sheep get in the roads and they block things, and I had to contend with that, which I did. But that Ironman just went really well. I swam in Hellier's Bay and did the bike. Of course, you had the bike on the other side of the road, which I had to quick get used to, because there were cars coming, and there were steep drop-offs on that left side that I was riding the bike on. Got through that okay, and then running the marathon part. And there were lots of people cheering me on, and yeah, across the finish line, and checked my time. Sure enough, another first place. I thought, wow, fantastic. The next morning, I knew there'd be the newspaper coverage, and I wanted to take that back to Continental. I walked into this convenience store, and here's a stack of Sunday papers about 5 feet high, and I see my picture on the front page. And here it is, Ruth, a woman of iron, and this picture of me getting a massage at the tent afterwards. I took that back to Continental office and threw it on Dennis's desk. He looks down at that and he said, don't they have an Ironman in Japan coming up? And I said, yeah. And that was in August, so I figured 5 months, sure. What are they going to do if I quit, can't make it, fire me? I said, okay, I'll do it. So the same sequence, I board this plane and go to Narita, Japan. And Lake Biwa, you may have heard of it because they have these famous pearls there. And it's murky, you can't see the bottom, and it wasn't the best swim conditions, but that's the way it went. 2.4 miles in this, but it was there, I had to do it, so that went well. The bike, well, they have a lot of trains in Japan, and they don't change their schedule for us. And I'm in the lead, I know that because I saw women behind me, and I had to stop until this train went by, and it was long, and I thought, hurry up train, hurry up, hurry up. And finally the caboose, and I get back on my bike and I charge on down and across the finish line in tears. The Japanese people were lined up on both sides, and it was just a wonderful, magnificent feeling I had. Wow, I'm so lucky that all this has happened to me, and look at this right now. And the next morning, I am ready to go visit. There's a place called Deer Park in Nara, and I wanted to visit it. So I asked around the other triathletes, let's go to Nara Park. They said, what? I said, yeah. They said, oh, I'm too sore, I'm too tired, no way. And couldn't find anybody to go with me. So I thought, well, I'll just have to go alone. So I find the bus station and buy the ticket in yen, and I'm trying to figure out how to pay for it. And then I get on the bus, and it's about maybe 30 seats, 15 on each side. And I'm the only haole, of course. They're all Japanese. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I'm looking around, seeing the sights. And then I happened to look in the pocket of the seat in front of me. The pocket behind had a rolled up newspaper. And it's all in Japanese. And I thought, well, they won't have anything. And I thought, oh, they might have some pictures. So I pulled it open, spread the sheet out, and gasp. Oh my God. Oh, and I, out loud, oh, look. And the man across the way is an older gentleman, leans over, and I said, yeah. He said, give it to me. He said, I'm an English professor at Narita College. And he read through it, gets up in the aisle, faces everybody, and starts reading the story in Japanese and translating it. And he didn't translate it. I didn't know what it was saying, but they all clapped afterwards. This all big applause. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. I couldn't have figured out a script like this for a movie if I planned it. So that was another happy episode. So what happened next, I had the exercise handled, I had the diet handled, and I thought, you know, I'm trying to prove to everybody that this is the best diet, that plants have all this power. I need to do some more feats and maybe get some more attention, because people still didn't even know how to pronounce the word, much less what it meant. And so I thought, oh, there's Run to the Sun. This is a 37.2 mile run from Kahului up to the top of Haleakala, 10,200 feet. And it's one that I think I mentioned earlier, that it was just an incredible race. I just thought, my gosh, the air got thinner and thinner, and it was just an amazing event. I later, when I was visiting Maui, got in a car and drove that, and I kept thinking, I ran this, I ran that. Oh yeah, I remember 26 miles looking back at the beach down in Kahului, almost straight down, and thinking, wow, 26 miles. And then I looked up, 10 miles to go. I thought, oh, I better get moving. So another first place. So that was really fantastic and encouraging me to just keep doing whatever I could. In the meantime, Dr. McDougall had been following me and was so pleased with the progress, and it turned out that most of the women he had in his study already had chemotherapy and radiation, because had my timing not been just perfect, I might have been part of that same study. He said, you've got to write a book, because I showed him all this, what had been happening. I said, Dr. McDougall, I'm a nobody. They're not going to read my book. He said, listen, I tell women what to do, and they either can't do it, or I never see them again. They just find it so hard to do, and maybe your book will help. So I said, oh, okay. And the next time I saw him, he said, have you started that book yet? I said, oh, Dr. McDougall. He said, listen, I said, I don't have the software. I don't know anything about writing a book. And this was when he was writing his first book, The McDougall Plan. And he said, look, this is what you do. And he got me all the software I needed and said, okay, here you go, start writing. And so that's the genesis of my first book, A Race for Life. And that was really exciting. In fact, it has now been translated into Korean and German. And so that's pretty exciting too. I want to acknowledge my curiosity and being smart enough to take this information and, pardon the pun, run with it. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Dr. Kenneth Cooper. He is 91 years old, and he is the founder of the Cooper Aerobics Research Center in Dallas, Texas. Because I owed so much to him for getting me started running and then into triathlons, I sent him a copy of the manuscript of my first book, A Race for Life, and mailed it to him. And shortly after, I get a call from him from Dallas, and he said, I just read about your Race for Life. I can hardly believe what I just read. He said, I want you to come to the Cooper Clinic and I want to run every test in the book on you and see what you've got that enables you to beat cancer and do all these feats. So, and he said, and while you're here, he's chuckling, I'm going to give you a chance to set a world age group fitness record. So, of course, here's my great opportunity. So I fly there. The week before, there's a race in Tulsa that I had been invited to run. So I flew first to Tulsa, did that race on Sunday, and then flew to the Cooper Clinic right after that. So I had already done a race, and I thought, well, recovery, if I try to set this new world record, I should be totally recovered. So he runs all the tests, and he says, yeah, you're healthy. I don't know where you get your protein, though. And so, well, it should be obvious that I'm getting enough. He said, okay, well, let's see. If you're a cardiologist or know much about heart disease, you know the treadmill stress test, the bulky protocol. They put you on the treadmill, it's flat, and it starts slowly and starts speeding up, and then it gets faster and faster and steeper. And the treadmill always wins. And so I'm going, he's got me all wired up, EKG and checking my pulse and blood pressure. And he's watching on the monitors. Oh, by the way, he's great for PR, publicity. So he had all these reporters from the Dallas Daily News and radio stations and everything to watch this. And so I'm thinking, I've got to stay on as long as possible. And at that point he says, well, you've just passed the 30-year-old male superior category. I thought, whoa, that's pretty good. So I keep going. And it was getting so steep, and I was trying to run, and I knew I couldn't last much longer. And he said, hold on. Bingo, you just set a whole new world record. And so I thought, oh my gosh. And the flash bulbs, back in those days they had flash bulbs. And there were all these interviews, questions people were asking, and I was having fun answering the questions, see what a vegan diet can do. And Dr. Cooper says, and she just did a 15-mile race, or race last Sunday. And my gosh, it's really a testimony to the fitness level. He said, he turns to the press and said, and she's going to come back next year and break her own record. I said, oh, yeah, well, I can do it. So sure enough, I keep up with all my training and did it again, similar sequence and everything. And he said, okay, now when you turn 60, by the way, 55 to 59 age group that I held 2 records in. So he said, when you turn 60, come back and let's set a new age group record. So sure enough, we kept in touch. Oh, he did endorse my book, by the way. And so I come back shortly after turning 60, and he told me what the record was, the time you got to beat. And so sure enough, I'm watching the time on the treadmill and keep going, and thought, I gotta hang on, and did it again, set a new. So I've got 3 age group records at the Cooper Clinic. I was still doing triathlons, still racing. In fact, I've done 3 races in one weekend. One time I did a Friday night sunset run on the windward side. And then Saturday morning, there was a 5K race, and Sunday morning, another race, and I did all 3 of them. And the Friday night was not a qualified race. There was no prize or anything. It was just a fun run. but I got first place in both the Saturday and, no, I'm sorry, they were both on Sunday. That's right, both on Sunday. The 5K was at 7 in the morning and the triathlon was at 8. And I told the race director of the triathlon, I'm going to do a 5K first. It's at Alamana Park. And then when I cross the finish line, it'll be about 20 minutes. And then I'm going to drive to the start of the triathlon. And if I'm a little bit late, she said, don't worry, I can hold it. We'll wait till you get there. I said, okay, so I'm all set. Cross the finish line all in one. I'd parked the car right near the finish line. Didn't wait for the award ceremony. I knew I'd already gotten first place. Jumped in the car. This, by the way, was in Kailua, so I had to drive over the poly and got to the race about 10 minutes ahead of time, got the bike out of the trunk, got all set up, and here I am. The gun goes off at 8 o'clock, and I do the triathlon and another gold medal. Well, the next morning in the newspaper, in the sports section, there's the results of the 2 races. And by coincidence, and I have the clipping, by coincidence, the names Ruth Heidrich, at a time first age winner, and the second one, Ruth Heidrich, top winner. And so I get a telephone call shortly after that, and it's Don Chapman, who was then a sports reporter. And he said, I can't believe what I'm just reading. How could you get first place in 2 races Sunday morning? So I explained what I did, and he wrote this up in the paper and said, wow, that's pretty good. So that is where I started thinking, well, let's see, what other races can I do? Run to the Sun, and so whatever it was, and you can see the medals behind me. I didn't care where it was, how long it was. I get a call from Martin Rowe, my editor at Lantern Books, who's the editor of A Race for Life. And he said, you know, you just turned 70, and we need you to write a book on senior fitness. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have time. Well, he said, think about it. So I thought about it, called him back, and I said, okay, because it's more than just breast cancer. It's more than just exercise. It is everything you need to do. And I don't talk enough about heart disease, diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure. And here's a chance for senior fitness to cover all these things. So that was the genesis of my second book. Not long after that, I get another call from Martin. He, by the way, was the editor. While he was editing A Race for Life, and I'm talking about all running advantages, how good it is for you, he thought, well, I'm going to try it. And he tried it, loved it just like I did. In fact, it was running the Boston Marathon, the year of the Boston bomber. A lot of people remember that. Fortunately, he had crossed the line just before that. So he said, I want you to write a book on lifelong running. You've been running for 40 some odd years, and we need a book to show that you have longevity with this diet. So that was the genesis of my third published book by Lantern Books, Lifelong Running. And because he loved running as much as I did, for every chapter that I wrote, he added his part, his aspect as a young male running. So it's quite an interesting book. And I have a lot of anecdotes, like my logistics career took me to TDY, temporary duty, in Korea. Seoul, Korea, just outside of Seoul, at an air base there. And I was running one morning along the runway, and this Korean soldier came up with his combat gear and boots, and he starts running with me. He said, I want be pren, want be pren. And I couldn't understand what he was saying. And I figured out later, I want to be your friend. Pren is friend. So that's an anecdote that's in the book Lifelong Running, as well as many others. One of the questions I always get when I give talks to people is, how much of this and how much of that, and how do you substitute this? All these questions that, to me, I remember in the beginning that it was challenging, but I was lucky in that Dr. McDougall and his wife Mary were running cooking classes. And so I had a chance to find out how they did it, and made it a lot easier. I did find with many of their recipes, there were like 4 or 5, 7, 10 ingredients, and some of them had recipes for another one of the ingredients. And I thought, that's ridiculous. I don't have time to do all this cooking. So I decided on my own to write a book called Chef, which stands for cheap, healthy, easy, and fast. So I simplify things and try to make it as simple as possible. So there's some repetition, but I find you never get tired of food that tastes so good. It's like, does a cow get tired of oats, and horses and they eat the same thing all the time? And I found out later that Dr. McDougall and Mary pretty much have simplified their meals too. They have basically the same thing, and most people have the same thing for breakfast. So instead of bacon and eggs, you can have oatmeal and blueberries. You don't need to add sugar, cream, or anything else. Your taste buds change. Within 3 days, you start adapting to these tastes, and I just love the food. Look forward to each and every meal. There's one other book that, my website, started to mention that. It's ruthheidrich.com, and when you go to the website, there's an Ask Dr. Ruth. And I frequently get confused with that other Dr. Ruth. If you're old enough, you'll know who I'm talking about, Dr. Ruth Westheimer. She's a little old German lady, and she says, sex is very, very good. And so I was getting emails from men who had these sexual problems, and I would answer back, well, you've confused me with the other Dr. Ruth, but I can help you with your erectile dysfunction. And so I thought, okay, we got to write another book, how to prevent, reverse, and cure erectile dysfunction. So that's an ebook, and that's available on my website. And so, in fact, you can order any of my books from my website or from Lantern Books. Amazon carries some too. So I do answer questions. I try, especially with cancer patients, I get them from all over, including Beirut, Lebanon, Turkey, all over Canada, all over the US. Australia and New Zealand are big. Canada, of course, because they all tend to the Western diet and have the same problems we do. So I try to answer those questions right away, because I know what it's like to have a question about cancer and not be able to get an answer right away. So that's a high priority for me. Any question, I will answer it right away. I may sit on it for a while to make sure that I'm answering it completely, and then I think sometimes, oh, I can add this, I can add that. So I try to give complete answers. And I have some that have been, quote, following me for years. Brenda in Oklahoma, it's like we're old friends now, because she's made so many changes. She's so grateful. I always get these emails that fondly and blessings, and she refers other people to me. So it's been, you develop long-term relationships with some of these people. And one day somebody said, you ought to enter the Senior Olympics. And I said, the Senior Olympics? I'd never heard of it. I knew about the regular Olympics. In fact, when I was in high school, I was the only girl on the swim team. And Esther Williams, if any of you were old enough to remember her, she was a swim star. And I wanted to be her, and I wanted to enter the Olympics and win a gold medal in swimming. The dream of finally getting to the Olympics just came true. So I found out that it was going to be in Las Vegas, and entered it, sent my money in, made arrangements to have my bike sent on the plane with me as baggage, and did that Senior Olympics triathlon. And when I got there, it was the day before, and I didn't have time to check out the course. I didn't know where the bike and the swim were. The swim was going to be in the pool, but the bike and the run. And I thought, oh, no problem. I'll just follow the runner and biker in front of me. Well, I was first out of the pool and got on my bike, and I knew where to go from there, but I thought, I don't know the course. I don't know where I'm going. And finally, I saw a course marshal, and she had a sign, and you make a right turn. And I thought, oh, the rule is when in doubt, go straight and quit worrying about it. So that was my rule. When in doubt, go straight to the rest, and crossed the finish line on the bike and thought, well, I don't know the run course. Well, that's the rule again. When in doubt, go straight. And sure enough, I was first overall. I beat all the men. In Senior Olympics, you had to be, I think it was 50 and over. And by this time, I was in my 60s. But still, the diet, and this is what I'm trying to tell people, it's not that I'm an extraordinary athlete. It's that your plants provide all the power, the protein, everything you need. And you can do anything you want with it. And that's the example that I've been trying to show people for 40 years of being vegan and still loving the diet. It's a lot of fruits and veggies. I like the leafy greens to make sure that I'm getting all the minerals, especially the calcium and the iron, and I'm not deficient in anything. I don't take any drugs. I have perfect blood pressure, BMI of 16, slightly on the underside, and no excess body fat. Really couldn't be healthier by all the tests that they've given me. So that's another testimony to the fact that this is the healthiest diet. So the answer to my question, did you know, is now you do know. And so it's up to you what you want to do with this information. And if you're smart and if you're curious, you will try. And if you have any questions, I have a website called ruthheidrich.com.
Thank you, Dr. Ruth Heidrich, for this really inspirational talk. And thanks to all of you for watching. Please go to vsh.org to see more of our informative videos. Mahalo!